Aspire family. This is AJ Smith, Vice President Client Partner Development. I'm excited to kick off this month's newsletter. As I mentioned on the State of Aspire call yesterday, there's a lot going on in the new business front. For 2019, we've already added 21 new client partners. We're pacing well to hit at least 30 this year, which would be a record in terms of calendar year. We're in agreement with Madison Square Garden, supporting the Rangers and Knicks out of our National Sales Center coming up this month. We've got HBOB starting next month. This will be the 7th year that we're supporting Honda Battle of the Bands. We're launching on site at Drake, world-renowned Drake Relays, into this month. And just last week, Tony Garrett and myself were on site at University of New Orleans and then Nicholls State. So outside that, we've got a lot of other proposals, RFPs coming down the pipeline. So really busy on that front. Just as excited as I am about new business, we're just a couple weeks away now from the start of college football season. For me, being a former student athlete at Georgia Tech, playing just over there on the flats, if you can see it down there at historic Grant Field, Bobby Dodd Stadium, there's not a better time of the year. Recently, Bill Fagan and myself, we were on site at Clemson launching our partnership there, and it was really full circle. Our business started about just a little bit over 10 years ago at Georgia Tech, where Dan Radakovich and Bernie Mullen formed the first ever outsourced ticket sales partnership in college athletics. And here we are 10 years later launching with Clemson. I think it's really, symbolic that this year Georgia Tech and Clemson kick off Thursday Night Football on the ACC network, and a lot of similarities in terms of Aspire's growth, where we've come in 10 years. And go back to where I started with Aspire was at Georgia Tech because of that meeting with Dan and Bernie and Bill Duffy, and then Bernie and Bill Duffy hiring Bill Fagan, and then Bill Fagan hiring me from the Atlanta Falcons to be a sales consultant at Georgia Tech. And so I think what I want to talk about today in terms of how I can make an impact on this newsletter is just the sales process and what I went through. Coming out of Georgia Tech, I was one of the 98% that didn't go pro on the field, if you've seen the NCAA commercial, but I did go pro, so to speak, in sports business, and I got my start with the Atlanta Falcons. As I mentioned, I got connected with Bill Fagan and started at Georgia Tech as a sales consultant under his tutelage. I was awful. I was awful with the Falcons in terms of sales. I was a very transactional seller, very product-based, where I was kind of like going around knocking on doors, selling Cutco knives, or making cold calls, selling Comcast subscriptions. I quickly learned through my tutelage at the Falcons and at Georgia Tech that relationships matter. The relationships matter on sales calls, then they matter even so much more today in terms of my current role. I really want to think about that. We are relationship sellers, and the biggest takeaway for me in my career was when Charlie Chislagi, who's a sales trainer, some of you may have met him before, he came and did sales training at Georgia Tech, and he really got me to open up about myself. And we call them IMIs today. And I'm sure you've heard the phrase IMI, whether it's sales training with your manager or director or sales training with Boz. IMIs are so important. The more you share and the more you open up about yourself, the more the customer will be able to open up and you'll learn more about them. And the more you're able to learn about the customer, the better idea you have to know what to pitch. The Aspire brand is so much different today, whereas 10 years ago it was more messaging in terms of, hey, this is who we are and what we do. Now everybody knows our brand, and they know that we're the industry leader in this space, and so that respect, we receive a lot of inbound. Relationships matter so much, and networking does too. You'll see in the newsletter all the time that we're at strategic conferences year round. Whether it's at NACDA, CALS, Collegiate Sports Summit, it's really important for the A team, so to speak, be present at these events, because that's where the relationships truly are formed and networking goes on. We receive business at each of these conferences each year, which certainly pays for the investment that we make to attend these events. A couple examples of relationships that we've cultivated through the years. Obviously, going back to the point I made, 10 years ago with Dan Radakovich, Dan brought us in at Georgia Tech, and now 10 years later, he's bringing us in at Clemson. And so the other relationship is Tim Duncan. He's a new AD at University of New Orleans. Tim's been there for 2 months, but Aspire's had a relationship with Tim for at least 8 or 9 years. We first met Tim when he was the AD in South Atlanta at Clayton State University, and we developed a relationship there. About a year and a half ago, we were starting a partnership at Northeastern University where Tim was a deputy AD, and we developed even a strong relationship with Tim at Northeastern, and now he's at University of New Orleans, and there's a strong chance that we're going to come in and support Tim there. But his next stop at Northeastern, we came in and support him at New Orleans, the same thing. And so relationships matter. And more importantly, each day you across the country develop relationships with your customer. I say it all the time, you're the Aspire difference. The stories that we're able to go out in the field and tell to potential new prospects, universities, professional teams, start with each phone call you make. So continue to focus on consultative-based sales approach, develop relationships, ask for the sale, more importantly, always celebrate success and ring the bell.